So when we think about scarcity versus abundance, we think that when people encounter difficulties, they're thinking abundance, like there's so many options here, there's so many opportunities here, versus a scarcity mentality, which would be maybe I need to protect what I have. Maybe I need to guard against losing something. It is always about those things that we talk to our clients about because change is going to happen.
Welcome to a new edition of City on a Hill. I'm your host, Whitney Mendoza, and today I'm joined with Richard Smith, managing partner of Benton Bradford Consulting. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad that we finally have you on the podcast. We've already been talking, and so it's great to meet you in person and have you on. And we already started off camera talking about Star Wars, and so this is going to be a great conversation because you already know we're cool.
Exactly.
Point made.
Exactly.
I mean, mic drop. So tell us a little bit about Benton Bradford. I mean, I wanted to know you've worked with some very inspiring and big name companies.
Sure.
Georgia Power, Truist, Comcast, Cox. And I jotted down. I know you've got executive coaching, recruitment, some HR consulting there. So let's just start off and tell us what all you do at Benton Bradford.
Benton Bradford for me is a passion project. It's something that I created 13 years ago as a way to combine what I felt were all the best parts of my work, whether it was executive coaching, recruiting, diversity, equity, and inclusion, managing projects. All of those things were so inspiring to me to work with. Here's how I kind of came to consulting was that I was an operational leader, and the thing that would keep me up at night wasn't strategy. It was how to get people behind the work that we needed to get done. And that's how I came to consulting. So when I think about executive coaching, I think about how do I bring forth the best parts of an individual so that they can lead others in a way that honors their humanity while achieving business results. The same thing with recruiting. Recruiting, I look at as the tip of the talent management spear, where you bring in someone, you excite them, you delight them with your opportunity. And I thought that was exciting. Same thing with projects. I just love working in collaborative groups where sometimes you come up with an idea, you realize it's not the best idea, someone else has the idea in the room, and that feels awesome as well.
Yeah.
So that's how I created it.
Well, I love that because you teed up the focus that I kind of come up with for our show.
Great.
And just even the initial conversations that you and I have had, and then, as I mentioned to you before we started the show, of just looking at your LinkedIn and kind of gathering ideas. And I thought it would be perfect to really focus on this aspect of human capital.
Sure.
So let's start off on what specifically does that mean to you?
Human capital is really about the people within an organization. And I'm most concerned with people remaining human and having humanity at work. One of the things that we always talk about at Benton Bradford is trust, candor, humility, and grace. That these are the 4 essential elements for any working relationship, any initiative. If you want to do a change initiative, if you want to implement an ERP system, if you want to implement a new purchasing system, you want to do whatever it is, diversity, equity, inclusion, those 4 things are integral to the success of any of those projects.
Yeah. Well, I love a lot of what I found that you speak on too is this focus on authenticity, because I feel like that has to couple with the trust and the candor, right? Because
Absolutely.
if I'm not feeling like I'm getting the truth out of you and it's
right.
a genuine connection,
That's right.
I'm not going to pay attention to anything else that you have to say.
Right.
How do you feel that we represent that? And also, I'd love for you to highlight how we represent that in the right way, because I feel like a lot of people talk about authenticity.
Right.
And we have a general idea of what it means, but I think we struggle with, but what does that mean in its appropriate boxes, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? Like when you're with your spouse, there's a different type of authenticity versus when you're talking with your team members.
Right.
And so you want to share enough to where you're connecting with them on the right level. So what does that really look like in the workspace?
You know, we're really big on definitions at Benton Bradford. So I think it's important for individuals and organizations to define what authenticity means at work.
Yeah.
For me, authenticity at work is about sharing those parts of yourself that, number one, you want to share. So it's kind of like you do an inventory. What do I want to talk about? So for Richard Smith I love talking about my sons, Miles and Richard, who are 7 and 9. Love talking about my relationship with my wife. I love talking about my passion outside of work, which is science fiction and golf, two separate and totally unrelated things. But it is about sharing those parts of yourself so that people can get to know you in an authentic way.
Yeah.
And it's about, the way that I like to describe it to people is to say, when I go to church, there's certain behavior that is appropriate and acceptable in this particular space that would not be appropriate and acceptable when I'm at a bar, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that our work authenticity is just that, authenticity at work. It's not about putting on airs or being fake. It's about making sure that your behavior is appropriate for the environment that you're in.
And I'd love for some examples on how we show that. So like I was kind of thinking, like when you were talking about sci-fi and golf, right? I'm like, well, you can marry those together. What do you, the golf covers, what do you call those?
We don't use golf covers in our clubs. Koozies?
Well, you could get like a Darth Vader.
No, or you're talking about head covers.
Yes,
yes, head covers for your woods. Yes.
Okay, so like you could have, and that would 100% be a conversation starter. I'm going to be like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
You know what? I'm going to share with you a quick story. Okay. So I'm consulting with this firm, and very large company, and the CFO. We're talking, and somehow I mentioned something about Star Wars, or she overhears it. She's a huge Star Wars fan. So, I tell her how I'm going to Disney and how I'm going to make 4 lightsabers, one for me, both of my sons, and then an extra one for me, and all of it. And that was the way in which we began a connection and being authentic, because I'm truly passionate about that. So is she. She always goes to Disney. She always visits the same place and makes lightsabers. So we have that in common. But let me tell you what that does, is that when you are able to build that authentic connection, when you have a moment of constructive conflict, that is a buffer for you. Yeah. You've made deposits in someone's emotional bank account, as you can say. That when you have that constructive conflict, you're able to work through it in a way in which you are able to maintain one another's humanity without treating each other as if you don't really know the other person.
Yeah. So when we look at building that trust with others on our team, so that we can get to that authentic point. Kind of one of the other videos that I was watching through, you really talk about focusing on the basics, which I feel like those would be the trust, candor, your authenticity. Those are the basics. And I loved how you highlighted it in this view of, because when everything else crumbles, that's kind of like your North Star of how to come back to that, right? How does a company know what those basics are? And are those all the basics that we just talked about? Are there more there? But how do we build those? And we can take this in 2 parts, because I'm also curious of how you keep that at the forefront, right? And the reason I ask that is because I feel like, especially with the mix of in-office and hybrid, I think we're never going to go back to having everybody in the office. I think we're always going to be this hybrid.
That's correct.
I think if you're not offering your employees that option, you're going to lose them.
You are correct again.
But in the office, at least it feels like it's a little bit easier to have like the plaque on the wall that reminds us what is important here, or, the memos that say this is our mission. So how do you bring all that together in kind of like this new dynamic that we have going on?
what we have found recently is that companies are doubling down on core values. Okay. So let me take a step back and kind of explain this, is that culture is the thing that drives organizational success.
Love
a lot
that.
of times
Yep.
when people think about engagement, we did an engagement survey, we had 98%, we're really, really engaged. That's the individual's relationship with work. Culture is about the relationship to the company, the environment, particularly the leadership. So when companies think about corporate culture, core values, I have a client that thinks of core values as starting with heart, which is making sure that you come to every interaction with positive intent. Those types of values govern the behavior. So when we think about authenticity, we think about it in terms of what are the core values of the company and how can you behave in a way that maintains your humanity and integrity while upholding corporate values. Now, this can take place whether you're in person or on Teams or on Zoom.
Yeah.
It can take place anywhere. I'll give you a quick example. So I was coaching someone once, and they were talking to me about a series of emails that they had gotten from a colleague. And in these emails, there was a rather heated exchange. And they were like, well, Richard, how do I deal with this? How do I craft my response?
Yeah.
I said, we don't craft a response. He was like, well, what do you mean we don't craft a response? I said, we pick up the phone and we talk to this person. And we realize that this person is trying to solve the same issue, perhaps differently than what we would have done, but they are attempting to solve this issue. Pick up the phone, have a conversation, be a human, talk to one human to another. That is how we maintain them when we're in this hybrid kind of environment where we're in the office sometimes, we're out of office most of the time, is that we really have to go back and say, and really kind of use the platinum rule. Have you ever heard of the platinum rule?
I only know the golden rule.
The
I feel
golden
like
rule.
I'm really stepping it up, going platinum today. What is the platinum rule?
So the golden rule says,
Yes.
I will treat everyone as I want to be treated.
I see. I'm going to let
Right?
you say it. I
Right?
know where you're going. I'm going to let you say
Right?
it.
So
Yeah.
the golden rule assumes you are just like me.
Yeah.
The platinum rule says treat everyone as they would like to be treated, which says there may be some difference here.
Yep.
There may be a way that you're approaching it. Let me treat you the way that you want to be treated, which requires me to get to know you.
Yeah.
So it's important that when we think about these hybrid situations, when we think about core values, we're thinking about how can I relate to a person in a way that's authentic to me, honest to me, has integrity, but allows the other person to maintain theirs as well.
I love that. Oh gosh, I have so many thoughts, and they went in multiple directions. One of them, when you were talking about the platinum rule, though, I was listening to a recent podcast, and they were talking about servant leadership. And the guest on the other side of the microphone said, I have no problem. And he was talking about himself and that self-conviction because he made the comment, I have no problem being a servant leader until someone treats me like their servant.
Well, there you go.
And I was like, ooh, but we're kind of like that, right? Like, I want to serve you, but I don't really want you to treat me like I'm serving you. But in a way, I kind of feel like that's what you're saying is like, regardless of how they treat you, you're not gold, you're platinum.
Right.
You're on next level.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I think that at times in corporations, we have to engage in healthy boundaries. And to some degree, we have to teach people how we want to be treated.
Yeah.
And if someone is treating you in a manner in which they've taken your servant leadership and turned you into a servant, which is inappropriate, that's an opportunity to say, hey, let's just take a beat here. I know you're very hot. I know you're very passionate about this, but we've gotten to the point where we can't be respectful of one another. Why don't we take a moment, walk around the building, come back to this? But I think that these are moments where culture, values, humanity, and these are the things that Benton Bradford is all about. So when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, that's what we're thinking about. We are thinking programmatically, but it's more than a program. It's about
Yeah.
the intent. It's about how individuals actually are working together on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I love that. Tell me if I'm wrong here, because I think part of the reason we struggle with this, and you alluded to it in your response of take a beat, which is a pause. I think we don't like to pause. I think we're very fast-paced, get it done. Because as you were telling the story of this heated exchange over email, I'm sarcastically thinking in my head, because that's a great way to solve a problem. Right? Fire back and forth through an email or a text message. No, if you really want to fix it, you have to stop.
Yes.
Pick up the phone, have an actual conversation, and then you can move on. I feel like we struggle with that. I feel like it's just, we're like, actually, no, I'm going to respond to the email so that I can go do something over here while you come back at me with another email, and then I can pick back up where we left off.
Which is highly inefficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very. There is something that we often talk to our clients about, and it is, what is the greatest enemy of X initiative? Just name one. And I said, for us, it is an action orientation, which is the need to want to go out and do something versus thinking about something and being very mindful and very present and very planful. The other thing is limited paradigms. So we have a paradigm. Take the email situation. This email, I read it. There was tone there. I have a paradigm. I have a way in which I'm going to respond to this. Those are two things that limit people in terms of their responses, and that we have to treat these interactions as opportunities to develop a capability and a muscle to say, you know what? I used to take a long beat, but now I've really gotten proficient. I take much shorter beats. I've really gotten to the place where I don't leap to action. I really want to be thoughtful and planful about things, about my interactions, because I want to operate with the best of intentions, right?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How does this play in when it comes to hiring? And again, now we've got like a little bit of a, I don't want to say barrier, but it goes back to the old adage of you're on your best behavior during the interview, and where the true colors come out is when we start working together. So how has that changed specifically as it relates to, this new hybrid workplace?
I think people are looking for different skills, because I think when everyone was in the office, you could manage folks tightly, or they could, what I like to call snowbird, is hide in plain sight, right? They could look busy but not actually be doing anything.
It's true, yeah.
Whereas now in a hybrid work environment, it's really important for people to have this self-starting, self-initiative. Hey, I can kind of order my day. You don't have to order it for me. That's a little bit different. I also think it has put on leadership different requirements that they have to manage differently. No longer I can to some degree manage behaviors, but I'm really managing results, and I'm counting on you to manage your behaviors, right?
Yeah.
That lead to those results.
That's good.
So when we think about hiring, those are some of the things that certainly come into some of the conversations that we have is, hey, is this person going to be required to come in every day, 3 times a week? Is it completely remote? And then we develop interview questions that will enable our client to uncover how well someone would do in a particular environment.
Very nice.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that plays? Because I was also taking a look at, you've got a culture and leadership checklist that's on your site. And there's a question around lack of motivation. Uncover that for us. What does that look like? And then why is that happening? Because I feel like it's kind of prevalent in companies today.
There are a couple of things when corporations or individuals are feeling a lack of motivation. That tells me that they're not engaged in some way. Either there's something systemically going on, or there is a lack of engagement with their leader or leaders. So it's really important for me to uncover what are the root causes of that lack of motivation. The thing that we talk to our clients about is EQ within leadership. And we look at EQ in 3 different buckets. We look at self-management, how I manage my own emotions, relationship management, how I manage myself with others, and communication. And oftentimes, it's in one or more of those buckets that we find serious deficiencies with one or more leaders that impact someone's motivation. Maybe they aren't influencing appropriately. Maybe they don't have the right oral communication. Maybe they're not listening as closely as they should. Maybe they're not managing their relationships appropriately. Maybe they're an introvert. But whatever it is, those are the kinds of things that affect organizations and individuals' motivation to work in those organizations.
What do you think is the greatest challenge companies face today?
Wow.
I hear a lot of things. I mean, even just today, our conversation and what you have to navigate through.
Mm-hmm. It's really, I think probably 15 years ago, it was about, I'm going to hire people that have this particular skill. They're going to deploy those skills. I think now organizations must become more agile. They're hiring for skill sets, of course, that can do a particular job. But as we know, the external environment can change on a dime, and they will need to then deploy different skills on a different project. So I find an agile mindset is one. The other thing is really around a scarcity versus an abundance mindset.
Okay.
Right? So when we think about scarcity versus abundance, we think that when people encounter difficulties, they're thinking abundance, like there's so many options here, there's so many opportunities here, versus a scarcity mentality, which would be maybe I need to protect what I have. Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to guard against losing something. It is always about those things that we talk to our clients about, because change is going to happen. We all learn that in COVID.
Right.
And we're continuing to learn that.
Yeah.
As the economic environment, as the world becomes more destabilized, more authoritarian, there are more wars in the world. Supply chains are being disrupted. People are having to find different ways of getting the same work done.
When it comes to the war on talent, or the fight for talent, I really should call it, what is most attractive to those, I'm going to call them high caliber employees?
Mm-hmm. What's most important to them are leaders that have integrity, leaders that invest in them, leaders who are clear in their communication, and leaders that will allow them to innovate in a way that advances business. That's what people are looking for. I don't think that high potential talent or high value talent is looking for a job. They're looking to make an impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. All right, my last question that I ask all my guests. I'm excited to ask you. I'm looking forward to hearing your answer on this one.
I hope it's good.
So we have City on a Hill. Mm-hmm. And I always like to explain this question, because the question is, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to be a city on a hill? And there's definitely the biblical reference there of letting your light shine, which I think is exactly what you just said, right? Like, I want to make a difference, not here just for a job. But I also love to describe that in a way of, like, if you were driving to downtown Atlanta, right?
Okay.
If you started from like New York and you just kept driving straight down, even if you've never been to Georgia or never seen Atlanta, you would know you're getting close to the city before you ever reached it, right? What does that mean to you at Benton Bradford when you're standing out, amongst others in your realm, or just the work that you've done, the experience that you have? What makes Richard stand out?
We have an expression at Benton Bradford that is, Benton Bradford is where human capital and business strategy meet. And where we live is at the nexus of those two things. So when I think of a city on the hill, I'm thinking about, how do we go into these corporations and really improve the employee experience? How do we really engage leadership and excite them about leading, and not just about controlling their area? It's about, how do we engage every person in a process that is going to lead to more equity in terms of promotion, in terms of pay raises. It's going to lead to organizations not only having high engagement, but great market share, right? And doing it the right way and leading responsibly. So when I think of a city on a hill, I think of Benton Bradford as an organization that helps organizations reach their full potential while meeting business results.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you joining me
This
on
has
the
been fun.
podcast.
This has
Awesome.
been fun.
If anyone's listening and they want to learn how to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Well, they can go to the website, which is www.bentonbradford.com, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Benton Bradford, or they can call me directly at 404-510-1907.
Perfect. Richard Smith, Managing Partner of Benton Bradford. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And until next time, we'll probably be watching a Star Wars episode, and then we'll be back. See you then.